Well, it appears we have a new Scream Queen, and her name is Mia Goth. Pearl, the prequel to X, debuted over this past weekend, and this was easily one of my most anticipated movies for the rest of 2022. In a year that has been absolutely stacked with great horror films, X was one of my favorites. Even though I didn't get a chance to put out a full review for it, it's a movie that beautifully captures the feel of the golden age of slashers. It featured a fun cast of characters, some brutal kills, and of course, it introduced us to Pearl.
What? Are you alright?
No.
So when Ty West pulled an MCU and gave us an after-credit scene teasing a standalone Pearl film, I was all in. But did this live up to X, or was it an excruciatingly bad prequel? You see what I did there? Because Stop.
Oh, brother, this guy stinks!
Now I want to start off by saying, if you have yet to see X, I wouldn't consider that required viewing before going into this. While I know there's a ton of examples of prequels you should never watch before the original, this isn't one of those cases. Like, if you watch Pearl first, you're not going to spoil X for yourself. So with that being said, Ty West returns to the director's chair here. He also co-wrote the movie along with Mia Goth, in what is now her first writing and directing credit. And set in 1918, Pearl tells the story of a young girl living on her family farm that has to juggle helping her sick father, an overbearing, controlling mother, and dreams of being a star.
Make me the biggest star the world has ever known.
And jumping right into the positives, there's really only one place to start, and that is Mia Goth as our titular character. She absolutely carried this film on her shoulders, and I can't think of another movie this year where so much was riding on a single performance. She had a ton of screen time, like literally I'd say she's in about 98% of these scenes, and she was required to show such a range of emotions that if her acting here was mediocre or even just okay, I don't know how much this film would have worked for me. But luckily, she was incredible. Like, I felt bad for her, and then I was scared of her, and then I felt bad again, and then I was terrified of her. And somewhere between all that, I was jealous of a scarecrow. I know that part probably sounds weird, but trust me, it makes sense with some context. But seriously, she blew me away with her acting. Like, how has this girl never gone to drama school or had acting lessons? As great as she was in her dual roles in X as both Maxine and an older Pearl, she was so much better here. At one point near the end of this movie, she gives like an 8 or 9 minute monologue where the camera never cuts away from her. And you just have to sit there and watch this person breaking down and saying all these things out loud that she's been thinking the entire movie. And it's seriously a shame that Oscars never take horror movies seriously, because she was great this entire runtime, but that scene alone should garner her some Oscar attention.
But truth is, I'm not really a good person.
And then at the very end of the movie, there's the sequence where the credits are rolling, and I've never seen anything quite like this for a credit sequence. The camera's fixed on her and she's not speaking a single word. She's just holding this creepy smile while the credits roll in front of her. It was one of those moments where everybody in the theater was laughing at first because it was awkward and it was meant to be. But then the camera just stays on her and you start to see tears forming and just rolling down her cheeks while she's still holding that creepy ass smile. And the longer it goes on, it just went from awkward to uncomfortable to then deeply disturbing. I don't know how she does it, but Mia Goth just has this smile that chills you to the bone. This movie also made some great creative choices with the time period, the editing, and especially the sound design. Like I mentioned, Pearl takes place in 1918, which if you're not familiar is when the Spanish flu came through North America. So they make a ton of clever references about being cautious with this ongoing pandemic, and it somehow makes the movie feel topical, even taking place 100+ years in the past. And then as far as the sound design, one of the most effective moments I've seen from a horror movie in a long time is when Pearl steps out onto her porch and grabs this axe. There's this sequence where she's chasing somebody, and while most movies would have taken this opportunity to add some creepy music and crank it up to add tension, here they just let it play out naturally. No loud music, No sound effects, just this uneasy stillness to the air, and a crazy girl chasing somebody with an axe while they're begging her to stop. It was truly haunting. Next up in the positive category is the cinematography, which is probably the best I've seen from any movie this year. There are so many moments that I watched and I was just in awe because of the way they were shot. Pearl's audition, a scene involving her and her father on this pier, which has somewhat of a returning character if you've seen X, and then the scene involving the axe that I just talked about, are just a few that stick out to me as scenes where I was truly immersed. And then to go along with that, Ty West's use of color in Pearl is next level. There's this certain contrast and saturation used that makes some colors just seem so bright and vivid compared to things that look dull in the background by comparison. In fact, I've seen a lot of people describe this as a Technicolor Wizard of Oz, which is 100% accurate, but tonally, it also gives me some serious Gone with the Wind and Casablanca vibes, which brings me to my next point. I've heard countless people say, if you loved X, you'll love Pearl, but if you hated X, you probably won't care for this movie either. And to me, that's just a pretty lazy assessment, because although they do take place in the same universe, X and Pearl are two very different films, both reflective of the era that they take place. Where X is more of a grimy, hypersexualized, Texas Chainsaw type, Pearl is definitely an homage to classic cinema, and that shows through in the performances and just the general aesthetic of the film. And with that in mind, you may call this next thing a positive or a negative depending on what type of movie you're looking for, but Pearl is not nearly as gory as X.
That makes no fucking sense!
Now there are some great kills, but they're a little more spaced out and they come a little closer to the end of the runtime. And don't get me wrong, I love some gore in my horror movies, but the reason I consider it a positive for this movie specifically is I just don't think X levels of gore would have worked in Pearl. This was always meant to be more of an origin story, focusing on her broken dreams and slowly embracing that evil inside of her. If you want to compare it to anything, this feels more along the lines of a female version of the Joker with Joaquin Phoenix. And then my only negative would be that after seeing this, I feel like there's too big of a gap between where we leave Pearl off here and where we see her 60 years in the future. This movie did such a good job of developing her character and making her transformation believable that it doesn't make sense to not see what happens for the next 6 decades. There is so much potential for another film between Pearl and X, and I just hope someday we get it. But overall, as I'm sure you can guess, I absolutely loved Pearl. In a time where original, fresh ideas are a rare thing in Hollywood, this is the exception to the rule. And even though I'd consider X a little more rewatchable just because it's good slasher fun, I enjoyed Pearl more as an overall experience. It's a great origin story that doesn't suffer from the usual prequel problems. It's deeply disturbing, like there are scenes that will stick with me for a long time. It's beautifully shot, and we get an Oscar-worthy performance from Mia Goth as Pearl. I'm gonna give Pearl 9 scarecrows out of 10, overtaking my previous favorite horror movie of the year, which you can see a review for right up here. But that'll do it for my review of Ty West's Pearl. Let me know what you thought of this movie and how you're feeling about this entire trilogy up to this point. What's your levels of excitement for Maxine? And what other horror movies are you looking forward to for the rest of 2022? October on my channel is all about horror. So I plan on putting out a review for Barbarian, Halloween Ends, and maybe ranking a couple popular horror franchises. If there's anything specifically you want to see me rank or review, let me know down in the comments. As always, if you enjoyed this video, please consider giving it a like and subscribe so you don't miss any future content. I'll put a few other videos right over here so you can see what else my channel has to offer. And as always, we'll see you in the next one.